After e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3 and bishop e4, white continues with e5, and after c5, a3, bishop takes, pawn takes, and we're going through queen c7 in this specific chapter of how to beat the Winawer. So queen to g4 now, as mentioned in the previous video. In the previous video we went through pawn takes d4 and then queen g7, queen c3 check. It was a messy game. In this video we're going to go through the main move, which is actually very annoying, f5. This allows the protection of the square g7 by the black queen, so we can't take. And taking en passant is no good because we allow black to develop the knight and the pawn in e6 is defended by the bishop. It's not the end of the world, but you don't want to play that move. White's best move now is queen to g3, and now there's a few responses available. So knight c6 is not good because white goes on with knight f3, and we are still applying pressure on g7. That's why queen g3 was necessary. We have double defense over the square e5, so we don't have to worry about these two. We don't have to worry about the swap of pawns because we can take back and the knight is protecting d4. And the funny thing is that black can't castle anywhere. Let me explain why. Bishop d7, in order to castle long, will lose control of g7 with a direct attack on the rook, so that's not possible. The queen will no longer be defending here. Knight f6 is not possible. Knight e7 will also lose control of the square g7. Knight h6, and white goes on with bishop e2. And again, think about it. Black cannot castle because if he did, we're pinning the square in g7, so that means bishop wins the knight for free, so he can't castle. g6 is not possible because we will win the knight. Knight f7, you will still take the pawn with an attack on the rook. Yeah, you cannot take the rook, but the rook can't really attack you. You're winning a clean pawn and you're threatening knight g5. And in this position, black cannot play g6 because you win the pawn in c5. Your e5 pawn is still well defended. However, now you might argue that black can play bishop to d7 and castle long, but then you just carry on bishop e2, long castle, and now short castle. White's position is evaluated +2. You're up a pawn. There's no way for black to take the pawn in c5. Even removing the knight for an attack of the queen on the square c5, you just go with knight to d4. Position is evaluated as if white was up a piece. Black taking the pawn here means you can play pawn to a4 with a threat of bishop a3, trapping the queen, because the queen now has got nowhere to go. I mean, yeah, queen c7, but then you attack it again, queen b6, but then the rooks can attack the queen, the bishop's attacking this diagonal. So after a4, black's best move according to the engine is knight to c4, but here you just take, and after queen takes back, then bishop a3. Black can't take anything. The only bishop he has is completely useless. And now we have an idea of playing rook f to b1, bishop d6, stopping the king from moving to b8. If the king had moved to b8, you could still play bishop to d6 check and force the king to the vulnerable corner. And obviously you have an idea of playing rook before and doubling up the rooks. Position evaluated +5 or +6 at the moment, so let's carry on from the start. After e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop e4, e5, c5, attack the bishop, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen c7, and now queen g4 thematic. What to do against f5? Don't take en passant, play queen to g3. So we mentioned knight c6 is wrong. Let's look at pawn takes. That's also wrong because you just take back. Nothing to fear. And now knight c6 will give the same scenario that we've just seen, except that there's a swap in the center of the pawn, but that makes no difference whatsoever. You still have all of the threats over g7, meaning that black, cannot develop the bishop, cannot develop the knight without losing the pawn, and if pawn g6, then it's literally like before. So let's look at this other idea, which is knight to h6. How to continue here? You just take. Remember, queen c3 is not possible because you can take it. So after pawn takes back, bishop e2, and we have this incredible threat, bishop to h5. So if queen goes to f7 to stop that from happening, you go on with development knight h3, idea of playing knight f4, and now idea of pinning the queen to the king. At this moment, the position is already evaluated as if white was up a piece. So think about it, how terrible it is. There's nothing else that black can do. If black goes on and take the pawn in c2, then let's just see how the game will go on more or less. Bishop check, and after king to f8, knight e2 is the best move because we have to stop the check as we want to be able to get the queen into the game. Queen b2 to attack the rook doesn't work because of rook c1 attacking the bishop, and then after castling, white is completely winning. The pawn in d4 is safe, the pawn in a3 is safe, but even if we were to lose that pawn, it wouldn't be a problem. Here, if queen goes back to a4, trying to join the defense of the king, white continues with queen to h4, threatening queen f6, deadly move. And after knight to d7, stopping that from happening. Still, we now have the possibility to play queen d8 because the queen cannot protect, and checkmate is following very soon. So in this position we mentioned queen b2, queen a4, they don't work. What happens after queen c7? White goes on with queen f4, threatening queen h6 check. A move like queen to g7, very defensive, but the only move, basically is met with g4. White is inevitably going to swap pawns and then play rook g1, which is deadly. White king is completely safe. The center here that is closed allows the white king to be safe. So after g4 we can close the line. If black plays rook to g8 here, white continues with rook to c1 attacking the queen, the rook is protected, and we're gonna carry on with the same idea, because for example, let's say knight c6, or if you wanna move the queen, but then you have to stick around the bishop because otherwise the bishop will be undefended. Either way, let's say knight c6 developing, white will continue with the move g4. And if white were to play again knight, the ideas will be rook to c3, then rook to g1, and then swap the pawn for f5. There's nothing, by the way, that can be done to stop it, because after queen a5, for example, check, white goes on with king f1, and the plan remains the same. The rook is safe in c3, position evaluated +5 or 6 at the moment. All ideas have been mentioned. Make sure you use them whenever they play the Winawer against you. Thank you very much for following me so far. Remember to share my videos and subscribe to my channel in order to support my work so I can continue doing this, and see you tomorrow.